Thank you, Seema, for the kind introduction. Thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor to be here today and to speak with all of you. And today the title of my talk is Your Heart Counts, Mining Mobile Health Data for Cardiovascular Health. And Mike is actually one of the lead authors of this study as well and contributed a ton to making this work happen. So this probably isn't a surprise to any of you, but cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of lost years of life in 2013. And a large number of massive cohort studies have come out that repeatedly show that physical fitness is really one of the main factors that determines cardiovascular outcomes and survival time. This study by Blair of 60,000 subjects actually showed that physical fitness played a bigger role in CV outcomes than obesity, diabetes, and smoking combined. In the top left, this is a study that my advisor actually likes to quote quite a bit. Basically, the Moore study suggests that even 1 minute of physical activity can add 5 minutes to your life. So physical fitness is something people have control over. It's an intervention variable, and which is great news. And it's fairly well known that the important role of physical fitness in cardiovascular disease, but there is a lot that remains to still be learned. For example, the duration of physical activity, the types of activities, the intensity, as well as the interplay of somebody's genetics with the effects of physical fitness on their health. All of these are factors that remain to be explored. And one of the challenges of physical fitness studies is in many cases, if you track people over a long period of time, you have to rely somewhat on self-reported information. So kind of to address all of these questions, our lab designed the My Heart Counts study, and this is a snippet of our research findings that came out in JAMA Cardiology this January. So the My Heart Counts study is fully automated. We have an iPhone app that you can download from the App Store today, or you can also see it on myheartcounts.stanford.edu. And we actually have a beta version out for the Android with somewhat limited functionality, and a full-featured version is coming out shortly. So you can download that as well. And in this talk, I'm gonna kind of go over three things. So first, I'll give you an overview of the study and what we were trying to learn. I'll share some of our results and lessons learned, and then I'll delve into version 2 of the study and some of the new things we've added since the publication of our paper. So the study is fully conducted through the My Heart Counts phone app. Users download the app and then they walk through this online consent process. And this actually, we found, greatly lowers the barrier to entry because people don't necessarily need to show up at the clinic and go through this in-person consent process. They can simply download the app, go through the same kind of protocol as they would in a traditional clinical study, and learn about the use of the data and their privacy and all sorts of things like this. So when somebody has downloaded the app, they go through the 7-day period of being involved in the study. So on the bottom, you can kind of see the different phases. It's a little bit small. So first, they go through the consent process, and then they complete a physical activity readiness questionnaire. And then every day for 7 days, the app will track their physical activity through the motion sensors in the iPhone and in Android when that comes out. And also they are prompted to complete daily questionnaires about things like their diet, their sleep, their mood, and how well they're feeling that day. And finally, on the 7th day of the study, they complete the 6-minute walk test, also through the phone, and they can complete a heart age and 10-year risk questionnaire. And as subjects go through the study is actually built on top of ResearchKit, and it's fully integrated with HealthKit, which is really great because if someone has a wearable, like an Apple Watch or another type of device that integrates with HealthKit, we can get their heart rate data. And that can be extremely valuable for things like creating the next generation 6-minute walk test that incorporates heart rate data as well as the distance someone has walked. And really just any type of use case where you can think of continual heart rate data. So in addition to this passive monitoring in the background. Every day, the person will get a prompt kind of like this you can see on the Apple Watch, where it'll ask them to complete a daily questionnaire of the categories that I mentioned. And additionally, at the end, they'll complete the 6-minute walk test. And so in the left, you can kind of see the traditional setup of the 6-minute walk test, where someone just kind of walks around and they have a person that monitors how far they've walked. Whereas in the phone, the accelerometers in the phone will calculate the distance someone has traveled, and the user receives feedback of where they perform relative to other people who are doing the study as well. So it's kind of an interactive, engaging process. And because this process is automated, we were actually able to get 6,400 subjects to complete the 6-minute walk test. And just to put that in perspective, that's a very rich data set. Here you see some of the recent studies of 6-minute walk that have come out. And they have on the order of between a couple hundred to 900 participants, and My Heart Counts allowed us to get over 6,400 people. So this automated consent and engagement has proved really valuable in recruiting subjects. One of the other features of the app is a 10-year risk questionnaire and a lifetime risk questionnaire. And people can enter things like their age, whether they're a smoker, whether they have diabetes and high blood pressure. And then the app will tell them their heart age and their lifetime risk for cardiovascular disease. And on the graph on the right here, you can kind of see the predicted heart age of the My Heart Counts cohort relative to their true subject age. And so on average, the heart age of the subjects was about 6 years higher than their biological age, which is kind of interesting. And the test was actually implemented using the Cardiovascular Risk Assessment Guidelines published by the AHA in 2013. So you've just automated that process. And one of the things in particular this 10-year risk and lifetime risk assessment taught us is that people were actually pretty terrible at predicting their 10-year risk and their lifetime risk. You can kind of see in the curves, the red curve on the right indicates what people reported their 10-year risk to be, and the error of what the actual risk was from 0. So the curves are shifted quite far off in either direction, really. People could overestimate or underestimate. And this kind of highlights the importance of apps such as this, where you have kind of an objective measure of these risks and of daily activity, because as we see here, people don't really have a great sense of their true risk relative to others in the population. So the outcomes of our study, we ended up with 47,000 participants. You can see people got really excited when the study was released. So we kind of had this exponential function of how many people downloaded the app. We had people participate from all 50 states. The map here shows density of participation, kind of focusing on urban areas. And ages ranged from 18-year-olds all the way to people in their 70s and 80s, with kind of a peak in the 30s and 40s. There is, whenever you do a study like this through a phone, there is self-selection bias. So we had many more males than females enroll in the study, and this is something we're working to kind of even out in version 2, just by where we present the study and how we spread the word. And the breakdown here kind of shows how many people completed each phase of the protocol. So we had the highest compliance with the questionnaire data, and roughly 20,000 people, so half of our cohort, had enough passive physical activity data for us to make statistical conclusions about this. And so from these 20,000 subjects, we looked at 5 activity categories that the phone placed them in. So over the course of the week, the phone would sample their activity, and it would label them as either stationary, automotive, walking, running, cycling, or unknown. And here we see a principal component analysis of these activity states, and one of the interesting things that jumps out at us is people, there's 2 kind of blocks of data where the drivers tend to cluster together in terms of their activity patterns. And then we delved further into unsupervised clustering on this data. So it's a little bit faint to see, but we performed Kmeans clustering on these activity features. And then we further performed hierarchical clustering on the centroids of those clusters. And we were able to tease out dominant activity patterns. So for example, in the top left, corner here, you can see the drivers. So these are the people who are unsupervised clustering, pulled out in a group together, who on average spent a lot of time driving as compared to everybody else. We also have our largest cluster, which was sedentary people. So they spent more than 60 to 70% of their time stationary. And then we have an interesting cluster of weekend warriors. These were people who were less active during weekdays and then more active on weekends. And also our most active group, the daily joggers. So these were people who were consistently active throughout the week. And so we actually drew correlations of these clusters of activity patterns with people's health outcomes. And we saw, unsurprisingly, that the inactive group and our drivers had the highest self-reported incidence of chest pain, diabetes, heart disease, and joint pain. So pretty much every negative outcome that we sampled. Interestingly, the weekend warriors were equally as likely to have these negative health outcomes as our most active clusters. So that suggests that even a moderate level of physical activity during the weekends can play an important role in health outcomes. Of course, this is a correlation rather than a causation-based effect, so there may be other factors in play, but nevertheless, this was interesting for us to see. Also, we found that activity levels correlated with people's reported levels of life satisfaction. So every day, people use the app to report how happy, how worried, stressed, or depressed they were feeling, and that correlated quite well with their unsupervised clustering of their activity patterns. And so these findings, while they kind of support what all of you know to be the case, that exercise will improve your cardiovascular health and life satisfaction, we actually found a somewhat more novel effect in the data. We quantified the number of transition states that people underwent in their activity data. So this is the time someone changed from being active to being sedentary. So if you think of people who had the same overall activity throughout the day, but somebody kind of went to the gym maybe for an hour at the end of sitting for 8 hours, and then somebody else would get up and walk in brief stretches during their workday, we actually found that taking people with these different transition profiles, but the same overall level of activity, the people with the fewest transition states had the highest incidence of negative cardiovascular outcomes, while people with the highest number of transition states had the lowest incidence of cardiovascular disease, which was very interesting. And also some just cute results that we found. So my colleague Julian Homburger looked at activity patterns by geographic region. So the phone actually gives us the last 3 digits of the subject zip codes. And so we definitely found that activity patterns clustered by region. And similarly, these clusters tended to parallel the average life satisfaction reported by people in each state as well. So the West had the highest activity pattern as well as the level of life satisfaction. Also, we looked at how sleep patterns correlated with people's life satisfaction. This is work by my colleague Rachel Goldfeder. And the old adage, early to bed, early to rise, seemed to hold. Those were the people that had the highest life satisfaction. As compared to the people who went to bed late and woke up late, they had the lower level of satisfaction. But that wasn't statistically significant in this case. So right now, we're currently working on version 2 of the My Heart Counts study. So we're on clinicaltrials.gov. We're actively recruiting participants. So far, we have 2,100 people that signed up for version 2. And so in this case, we're focusing on interventions. So we're assigning participants to random coaching strategies and examining which types of coaching have the best result in improving their activity levels. We're also hoping to focus on gamification of the app to some degree to help retain users. Very often in these mobile phone-based studies, you see kind of a drop-off of subjects where people get really excited, they download the app, and then kind of 2 or 3 days in, they lose interest, which is suboptimal. So we're really trying to focus on how to keep them engaged and involved all throughout the study period. And we're very excited about our integration with 23andMe. So we're starting to look at the interplay of genetics and physical activity patterns on cardiovascular health. And in the near future, we're actually planning to add integration with patients' electronic health records and to launch in other parts of the world. So right now, the app is available in the US, the UK, and Hong Kong, and we're looking to expand it to other regions. And as I mentioned, we're working on an Android version in addition to the iPhone version. So right now, the app is fully integrated with 23andMe. Subjects can upload their 23andMe profiles, and 812 users have done that so far. We're particularly excited about this because 23andMe has nearly 2 million users with over 80% active engagement. So we're really hoping that some of these people will submit their genetic data, and then that provides a very valuable resource for our research. And from the 800 people that have submitted their data so far, we have done a genome-wide association study, albeit a fairly small one, on 795 people. But we did find single nucleotide polymorphisms that correlated with vigorous activity and moderate activity, as well as race, unsurprisingly. And so several of these polymorphisms you see here were found in the ST6 beta-galactosamide gene, FNBP1, and FAR2. And the variants in these genes that we observed were associated with increased activity. So we're probably going to follow up and see and validate this in a different cohort. And another factor we're focusing on, as I mentioned, is randomized coaching strategies. So we have a crossover design where everybody undergoes 1 week of passive baseline monitoring, and then subjects are randomly assigned to one of 4 intervention strategies. And so these include passive education, where every day they get a prompt from the American Heart Association, where they see an article kind of extolling the virtues of exercise and activity on their health outcomes. Another type of intervention is personalized coaching based on the activity cluster that people are assigned to from their week 1 data. A third strategy is a prompt that reminds people to kind of stand up when they've been sitting down for an hour, and to vary up their physical activity patterns and get those transition states up. And finally, subjects may receive a daily prompt in the middle of the day to remind them to complete their 10,000 steps a day. And each of these stages lasts for 7 days. And the primary outcome we're looking for in this trial is the average daily step count per stage compared to the subject's individual baseline. We're also looking at some secondary outcomes such as their life satisfaction score, their sleep duration, and their personal risk assessment score. And the last kind of goal of this phase of the study is to really increase user engagement. And so we're hoping to do that by providing increased user feedback. So we've tried to gamify the app by providing these trophies as subjects complete each phase of the study. So they get a coaching completion trophy, and then a coaching goal trophy, and then they get the coaching completion trophy at the very end, and they kind of work their way up through mid-level trophies. And as they go through the study, they get feedback on where they rank relative to other app users on each of the metrics that we're analyzing as well. And so right now our data is preliminary because we're still enrolling participants in the study, and we're hoping to increase the numbers. But from the 2,100 people we're looked at, we are definitely seeing an effect on the daily steps reported in HealthKit when a coaching strategy is applied. So interestingly, the AHA guidelines seem to have the largest effect in increasing subject daily step count, followed closely by the feedback tailored to the specific activity cluster of the person. This is a somewhat correlated metric, but we're also looking at the daily distance in meters that subjects walk. And here also we see that providing them with daily AHA articles significantly improves the distance that they've traveled as well. All of the coaching strategies seem to play an effect, but that seems to be the one that has the highest impact on subject behavior. And so finally, just to sum up, some of our lessons learned is that there's both challenges and opportunities posed by this large-scale mobile phone study. So probably the most obvious one is we have rapid access to very large populations. Basically, the only requirement for a person to enroll in the My Heart Counts study was that they be over 18 years of age and reside in the US and later the UK or Hong Kong as well. Mobile consent lowers the barrier to entry. Subjects are less likely to drop out because the consent process is arduous. We also have access to phone sensor measurements, both through HealthKit and the built-in accelerometry chips on the phone, and we can combine them with subject recall to see how well subjects perform in predicting their activity patterns and their lifetime risks of heart disease. The flip side of that is because the barrier to entry is low, subjects tend to be less engaged. So we see a higher dropout rate maybe than we would in a traditional clinical study. So gamification strategies might help with increasing user retention. That being said, however, we did see 2 orders of magnitude more subjects recruited for example, the 6-minute walk test than had previously been done, and 1 order of magnitude more completed this test than in previous traditional clinical studies. So the benefits definitely outweigh the challenges. And in conclusion, this is our My Heart Counts team with Mike McConnell and Dr. Ewan Ashley as the leads of the study. And if you'd like to download the app or learn more, please visit myheartcounts.stanford.edu, or you can also find it in the App Store. And thank you. That concludes my presentation.